Digital 410 proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II based podcast, and the final episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast for the year 2023. I want to thank each and every one of you for continuing to hang out with us for another year, and we have a nice, exciting episode tonight. We're going to revisit some of our notable guests and some of our favorite podcasts of the year. These aren't all our favorite podcasts, but these are just a few that we can fit into an episode. But to wrap this episode, wrap this year up, Mr. Jeff Copsetta. Jeff, sir, how you doing tonight, fella?
Man, I'm excited. It's sad that 2023 is coming to an end, but I'm excited for what's in store for 2024 at What's the Scuttlebutt.
You know, I have no way of proving it, but I like to think that the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast is the first World War II based podcast to have ever recorded an episode live from a World War II reenactment. We are also the first World War II based podcast to ever record live from an American Kennel Association dog show with our friends over at the Doberman booth with our friends from Walking Point. And I'm going to go out and say we are the first World War II based podcast to record live from the cab of a 1943 Willys, or is that a 43 Willys?
42 Ford.
Even better, 42 Ford.
Yeah.
Mike Blowski, a friend of mine, who's on podcast twice in the early days, he had a Ford that was 3 on the tree. Believe it or not. And he had it, took to reenactments quite a few years, but it was beat up and he finally sold it. But it's the reenacting, you will come across a lot of Jeeps. A lot of guys have them. It's the only one I've ever seen that was 3 on the tree, and he researched it, and that was the original configuration for that series. It was very limited edition, but he had one.
Wow.
And it's one thing to get modern day cats, the younger kids, to put in a Jeep with the 4-speed or the 5-speed and have them try to shift it. But when it's a 3 on the tree, like, what the hell is this? Where's park, neutral, and reverse? No, it doesn't work that way. But yeah, it's one of those things. So congratulations on setting the bar high. We are now broadcasting from a Jeep. Maybe one day we can broadcast from the back of like a C-47 or something. That'd be badass.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, as we kind of expand our horizons at What's the Scuttlebutt, I mean, I can see, maybe from the cockpit of a P-51 or up in the nose of a B-17, or, I mean, we've been going around so much, and it helps that we're not just podcasters. I mean, we're reenactors, and we do so much other things, in the World War II community. So the opportunities that get thrown at us, man, it's, the sky's the limit. And I think that's what makes our podcast, not only unique, but kind of helps keep it that cutting edge where, we don't have $1 million Joe Rogan studio. Some of our stuff's a little grainy.
But if someone's interested in donating us a $20 studio, that'd be great too. I mean, we'll take a $2 million, we'll take a $50,000, we'll take a $200 studio. Well, anything you want to help, just go ahead and email us at mailcall@WTSPWWII.com. But at that point, you and I, first video we ever did together, we shot in front of a Japanese submarine that was captured during Pearl Harbor from the National Museum of the World War of the Pacific. So there's that. So we've, you and I were talking before we went on the air, and it was interesting. I was watching a TikTok from a famous female rapper whose boyfriend's even more famous, that she records all his videos, but she also does live streams. And she was like, for all the other live streamers out there, have you guys ever done a 2-3 hour long live stream and was done? Have no idea what the hell you talked about? I'm like, yeah, every Monday at 9 o'clock. And 5 years of radio, podcasting, chances are our audience can come up and say, hey, remember episode 1, blah, blah, blah. Not really. I was going back and cutting these clips. I'm like, wow, we had a lot of amazing guests on this year. And when you do this every week, sometimes, the very next day you don't even remember what you talked about, especially when you vlogged 171 episodes tonight. And so, it's just one of those things. That's an interesting question for you. You've had a lot of experience doing video stuff, TV stuff, and now podcasting. You've been doing this for a few years now. Are there sometimes when you look back at it, you realize, well, I don't remember half the stuff we've done. How does it affect your memory, or looking back on how many episodes we've done now?
Yeah, that actually happens a lot, and it comes from my students at the high school. They'll apparently be scrolling through Jeff Copsetta on Google Images, and she's like, "Mr. Copsetta, what is that?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." Like shooting a flamethrower somewhere. You just see like a flame burst from the front of the Thompson, or all this crazy stuff that we've done. I mean, dude, I couldn't tell you one thing from the first episode we did together at the wrap party for Walking Point.
I can. My most embarrassing moment in our relationship, when I accused you of being a former Marine. Because I just met you. You were in a Marine Corps uniform all weekend. You were there as the military advisor for Walking Point, and I just did the math. I knew you were a veteran, and I knew you were there, but we hadn't really talked too much off set, so I was like, "Oh damn, that hurt." But it was a good time. Everybody had a good laugh.
I didn't even remember that, so we're good.
Yeah. Yeah. Every once in a while, there's the one that sticks you a little bit, that just makes you want to work a little harder for the next one. But yeah, before we kick off things, we are wrapping it up, and Christmas is right around the corner. You had a little interesting little tidbit you wanted to present to our audience about and we've done this a little bit differently the past few years. We've talked about when holidays roll around, how that holiday and the importance of that holiday affected those, whether it's frontline or home front, during that era. So you have something else you wanted to contribute tonight as far as Christmas, the holidays, and the season around the era of World War II.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Christmas is such an important time for everybody, I think, and most especially for soldiers. And when they're deployed overseas, it kind of, everything else kind of fizzles out, and you just kind of come together no matter where you are. Some of the crudest Christmas trees have been put up all over the world on battlefronts, all over. And so there is something special about Christmas. And, of course, with World War II, especially from the United States perspective, Christmas 1941, my goodness, how different that was, because of that change and us being thrust into the war 3 weeks prior to that. So that must have been a very, very unique Christmas, not only for those who were already, not deployed, but of course stationed, overseas somewhere. And then, of course, at the home front. So I thought, let's take a look at what Christmas was like on the home front. What exactly was Christmas, and just some tidbits of information about Christmas at the home front. And this was compiled by the National World War II Museum, which they just do a fabulous job on so many things. So it says here that during World War II, Christmas trees were in short supply because of a lack of manpower to cut the trees down and a shortage of railroad space to ship the trees to the market. Americans rushed to buy American-made Visca artificial trees. So, I didn't think about artificial trees going back that far, but it makes sense. And I kind of did a little more research on Visca, and it's like an imitation straw.
Okay, makes sense. Now,
use
for you young kids, he means straw as in hay, the wheat, and not like the drinking straw.
Oh, right, yeah. And then there was another company, and I can't remember the name, but there was another company that made toilet brushes that they joined the effort.
Makes perfect
stiff
sense.
Bristles,
yeah.
To make artificial Christmas trees. So, okay, so in 1941, a 5-foot Christmas tree, now this is a real tree, could be purchased for how much, do you think?
1941, coming off the Great Depression. We're going to adjust a little bit we're going to de-adjust for inflation. I'm going to say a steady conservative $1.75.
Pretty close, 75 cents.
Wow.
Bought you a 5-foot Christmas tree in 1941.
2023, it'll cost you about $97, and that's for not even a Douglas fir.
Yeah, they're ridiculous. They're ridiculous now. So with the shortage of materials like aluminum and tin that were used to produce ornaments, that led many people to make their own ornaments at home. Magazines contained patterns for ornaments made out of non-priority war materials like paper, string, and natural objects such as pine cones or nuts. So I thought that was interesting. What magazines are there out there, maybe at the, on the shelves of an antique store somewhere, where you just take it home and you flip it open and there's patterns for homemade ornaments?
And those magazines are going to be far more valuable because of the fact that you got to find one that someone didn't actually participate in the intended use of said magazine and cut it all up, or at least pull out those pages.
Yeah. So let's see. The next one, electric bubble lights were created during the 1940s, and they still remain popular even today.
I remember those. My grandparents, obviously, we've talked about it. They fought in the war. And growing up in the 70s and 80s, not that far off from the 40s, and my dad and my mom had gotten divorced at that point. My mom was not financially stable, and so all those quote-unquote old ornaments from the 50s and 60s that my grandparents replaced through the 70s and 80s got handed down to my mom. And so I remember they're like a little ceramic pot almost, if you think about it, and there's a light bulb in it, and there's just a real thin red, some are blue, some are green, just glass, maybe about the circumference of an old school thermometer you would stick under your tongue, and there's a little point at the top, and they had red fluid in them, blue fluid, and green, and kind of like a lava lamp without the lava, that light bulb would heat up, and it would cause that water to boil just enough that there's a little bubbler coming from the bottom, and it'd go to the top. And I remember the big red bulbs that were colored, and the paint would flake off. And interestingly enough, if you guys head over to the Facebook page for the What's the Scuttlebutt, I shared an ad that fellow living historian Ted, who's also been on the show, he shared an advertisement from 1951 boasting the fact that these new Christmas lights come with non-flaking paint. And I remember the old lights, how that paint would chip off of them. And so you'd have this orange light or blue light or green light, and the paint was flaking off, so half of it was translucent. And, of course, if you had a real tree, you had to make sure those things were watered because those bulbs got so damn hot, they would catch your tree on fire, let alone burn somebody if you went and touched them. So I remember those bubblers. I remember a lot of those early stuff. I remember the early Christmas, like Santa Claus, the Frosty the Snowman, all those things cut out that your parents would buy at the store in perforated cardboard. I can see all those decorations and a lot of stuff. Once again, my grandparents held over from the 40s and 50s and 60s. And so I remember a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. There's, let's see, there's another one here that is still pretty popular as well. Probably just done a little bit differently. But to give their Christmas tree a snow-covered effect.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I'm not going to step it. I'm going to let you say it. But I was thinking right when you started this, I'm like, if Tony over at WLVN Radio has one hair on his back, he has this, despite the fact of what it's made out of. Please inform our audience what artificial snow was made out of in 1943.
Well, it says here they mixed a box of Lux soap powder and 2 cups of water, and they brushed the concoction on the branches of the tree to give it the snow effect. So
that's the homemade version. The retail version was made out of asbestos. No lie.
Yeah.
The commercial grade artificial snow that you could buy to sprinkle around on your tree was asbestos flakes.
It's good. It's good. And when you get the bubble lights with the paint that doesn't flake, it's because they just added lead to it.
Yep. Have you heard the whole conspiracy theory about why they outlawed lead paint in the 80s, in the 70s? Because we all grew up in that era. It's all because they don't want kids biting on the paint. The paint would chip and they'd eat lead flakes. That's what we were told. The conspiracy nuts nowadays is, no, the government didn't want us all making Faraday cages because if you had lead paint, no, they couldn't listen to you. And not only that, but truthfully, TV signals couldn't get in your house, neither could radio signals, because you're basically building a Faraday cage around your house. And so that's the true reason why they got rid of lead paint, so that they could still get TV signals and radio signals into your homes. Whether there's any truth to that, I don't know. It kind of makes sense, but that's the tinfoil hat version of why we don't have lead paint anymore.
Right. This one I think I found especially interesting here. So fewer men at home resulted in fewer men available to dress up like Santa. So women served as substitute Santas at Saks Fifth Avenue in New York City and at other department stores throughout the United States. Now, there are photos available. You can look these up as women dressed as Santa. And I just, I mean, at first I couldn't believe it, and then I thought, well, okay, I mean, that makes sense.
Hey, if the Shakespearean actors could be men dressed up as women, then why can't women dress up like Santa Claus during the war when there's no men around?
So, well, I mean, and I think that's the first thing I thought of, like, oh, women dressed as Santa, like, that seems like a new age thing.
Mm-hmm.
But not really, right? In the, in the necessity, time of necessity, you got to do what you got to do. So this one I think will resonate with most people. I'll Be Home for Christmas and White Christmas were both written during the 1940s. Quickly gained popularity with the war-weary but optimistic population, of course, those two big hits. Travel during the holidays was limited for most families due to the rationing of tires and gasoline. So Americans saved up their food ration stamps to provide extra food for a fine holiday meal. And lastly, many Americans threw their German blown glass ornaments and exotic Japanese ornaments in the trash as soon as the war began. No surprise. Shortly after the war, Corning Glass Company in New York began mass producing Christmas tree balls using machines designed to produce light bulbs.
There you go.
Corning could make more ornaments in a single minute than a German cottage glass blower could make in a whole day.
Oh, absolutely. Mass production on high.
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought those were kind of interesting things from the home front.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. It's like Christmas and the holiday season is the one time of the year that most of our non-World War II aficionado contemporaries will actually be, I don't want to say inundated, but have 1940s themed stuff pumped into their lives because of the Christmas music. That's usually when most people hear music from that era, unless it's the Mariah Carey song on repeat. It's interesting. When I moved to California in 2001, and I lived in Long Beach, and I was going to the malls, Nightmare Before Christmas was huge. And so, it being obviously LA and Disney and all that stuff, when you went around to the malls in 2001, 2002, you didn't hear classical Christmas music. It was basically everywhere you went was Nightmare Before Christmas soundtrack everywhere. That's the one thing I remember about when I lived in California. We want to remind everybody, sign up, head over to WTSPWWII.com. Probably in February, we're going to be giving away the second print from Valor Studios. We will post up some full colored pictures here over the holiday weekend. All you have to do is sign up for Patreon. You can be a $1 a month subscriber, $7.50 a month, or $3.50 a month. And you'll be entered to win. We're going to draw a name for that print, and we're going to continue to do giveaways throughout the year. We discussed it in the past, and it never occurred to me, and I don't think why not. If you sign up for $7.50 a month plan, after the second month, we offer you a free T-shirt. I'm going to extend that to a hat, too. So if you got T-shirts and you want the WTSP hat, when I reach out to you and I say, hey, what T-shirt do you want? If you want the hat, say, hey, I'd rather have this hat instead. We'll be more than happy to send you the hat. So if you are signed up for the $7.50 a month plan, we will happily send you a hat or the T-shirt of your choice after month number 2. And if you guys haven't done so, please head over to YouTube.com. Click on the YouTube link. Find us. Look for Digital 410 Media. Or just type in WTSP World War II. And it'll come up in the search. Like and subscribe. A little housekeeping. We're going to change things up coming up in 2024. We're going to focus more on production and presenting you more full episodes. And the only way we can truly do that is not to do them live. That way we can produce them, we can edit them, and we can put more effort and energy into bringing you guys full history. And so we're still going to air episodes every Monday, but we're not going to do them live so that we can put a little more production into them. We're going to try to build a full staff and really crank things up for 2024, and we're excited about that. But before we go down too far down the road 2024, if you guys don't mind, we want to revisit some of our favorite moments of 2023. And I think we should go back, all the way back to episode 141, aired live on February 9th, 2023, with Mr. Lance Faulkner. He is a living historian. But more importantly, if you're a living historian and you have error-correct dog tags, I would say there's about a 97.9% chance, at least if you did Army, you got them from World War II dog tags. And so we were thrilled to have Mr. Faulkner on, and we're going to revisit little bit of his episode, and we will discuss that. So here is episode 141, back from February 9th, 2023.
I was up here visiting my in-laws about 15, 16 years ago, and it's a long drive from Phoenix, Arizona to the Portland area, and my wife and I got talking, and she goes, well, you should make dog tags. And she was indicating I should make dog tags for dogs. I did a bit of research while I was up here and found out dog tags for dogs was a really competitive area, but what about dog tags for people? And so at the end of that vacation visiting the in-laws, I had already sourced a set of dog tags, dog tags chains, found a machine in Phoenix. And so from about 2 weeks from the moment she said, hey, do this, you should do this, I was doing it. And I was in internet marketing at the time. So
there you go.
I had a website up and running in about 2 days. And within the first month, I sold my first set. And it's paid for a lot of hobby stuff since.
I don't want to do this, but I feel we need to. Can we just settle once and for all? Can you squash the horrible lore about the notch? Can we just bury the notch nonsense now? Let's just get it out of the way.
So the main machine that makes dog tags is a Dressograph. And the Dressograph was a company that made machines that did stampings. And before you had mimeographs and stuff like that, they would make a machine that would stamp your address, and your electric company would send you your bill, and they would use that for your address. And so the medical corps wanted to stamp forms very quickly with the soldiers' information, which is why those are embossed. It goes down. And to do that, they had what's called a Dressograph Model 70, which is a hand stamper. And it looks like those embossing label things you had when you were a kid, but it's about the size of a 45.
Okay.
And your dog tag fits in there. And to keep the dog tag from moving side to side, it had a notch.
Yeah.
And that notch keeps it from moving side to side.
Because as one can imagine, when you're stamping aluminum, it may have a tendency to jostle a bit, which would not be very good to look at in singular. So for all those people, for some reason, I think it probably came out around Vietnam movies or whatever. You know how they got the notch in the dog? Okay, if in fact that was what they're going to do with it, they wouldn't need the notch. The notch would not help any way, shape, and form of placing the dog tag in one's teeth, etc. So I remember I first heard that when I was probably in elementary school. And for those of you who don't know, because I was trying to be delicate about it, but for those of you who don't know what I was talking about, there's this urban legend, and as I insinuated, I think it started around Vietnam. For whatever reason, someone started the rumor that the reason you had two dog tags and they had the notch in it is they would take one to send back, and then they would take the other one, put in someone's mouth, clamp their jaw down it, and then kick them in the bottom jaw to make the dog tag stick in between their teeth, so they wouldn't lose it when they were burying the body or transporting the body. And so I just wanted to put that to rest because I got so tired of hearing that. I actually heard people mention, like, talking to civilians, oh, is that the notch for the teeth? No, it's not. It's where they held the dog tag sturdy, as you heard him say, because once again we're talking, it's like I want to say like a giant typewriter, but I realize probably half of our audience has never used a typewriter before, so they don't even get that reference. But yeah, it was just a form of necessity to hold the template and to spot. But that's a very good episode. And I was thinking, Jeff, obviously we can order dog tags in the future. 20 years from now, you can just get them off some website and they're stamped out probably in China or some place real quick. We need guys like Lance Faulkner in our life. We need guys who can tell you the history, can tell you what machine, what type stamp, what gauge metal. We need that part of World War II history to stay alive. And so hopefully there's someone in Lance Faulkner's universe that he can pass that information on to. Maybe he's got a young, enterprising, thirsty intern who's sucking up the knowledge that he has. So as he gets older and moves on, someone else will carry that torch of wisdom and be able to show up at living history events and things like that, and be able to stamp those out in the parking lot, because that's all, you know, we talk about all the time, whether it's M1 helmets or canteens. It's the little things like that we talk about too. Everybody in this hobby, we all have that one little weird thing that we love, and for Lance Faulkner, it's dog tags and everything about the machines, and he's found a way to, whether it's a full-blown enterprise, which I think it is, or it's just a way to supplement his hobby. I don't know. I think it's a full-blown career for him at this point, but God love him, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know there was that much to know about dog tags, honestly, till we had him on. It was great.
Yep. And, I mean, he could tell, oh, no, that machine came out this year. Oh, no, Jeff, I think you guys have this machine. Because you were talking to him about the machine that you guys have, and how your son would every once in a while stamp out some dog tags for the people who were coming to the museum. And he'd say, no, I think you guys have this machine and this and that. So it's very, very cool.
Yeah.
We're going to shoot on that next to episode 142. No, 143. I actually have 141, but that was the episode Lance was on. Mr. George Luz Jr., if you don't know, George Luz Sr. was a member of Easy Company, 101st Airborne 506, and had a prominent role of his life portrayed in the miniseries Band of Brothers. And we had George Luz on here. And we were kind of talking with Henry, and I brought up the fact that George and Henry kind of share the same role in modern day life, and that is, you know, keeping the memory of their father alive and sharing that same sort of unique position in life. And here's George Luz and Henry talking about Henry's father, the things left behind, and decisions that one has to make when it comes to family artifacts.
But yeah, so my dad, he shared a lot of stuff with me. I really wish I would have had the technology. You know, you're so blessed that, you know, you've got so much of your dad's writings, and, you know, wrote a book and the whole Bible story, man. That's just blows me away.
You and Henry share a similar position in modern day contemporary society, and that is, you know, your father's legacy, and not only in the world of World War II, but in these particular miniseries. What would you do if you're in that position where there was a George Luz Bible that, you know, Library of Congress said, hey, why don't you ship that bad boy out here? Would you quickly do it, or would you hold on to it for a while?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, I don't know, because you know that's got your dad's hands on it, and you know, when I look at everything around that we have from my dad, you know, okay, that's got my dad's hands on it, and that is such a significant thing, because you know, I was looking back at the Pacific, because I had watched it, and I got a longer story about watching the series, how cool it was. But, you know, recently going over some of the stuff, listening to your mom, listening to your dad, you know, when you put the puzzle together and you look at that, and, you know, number one, it's a Bible. Number one, it was in his hands. It was in the most difficult spot he was ever in. And he had the wherewithal to just put those little blurbs in there, those little words, and then he, you know, went back home and then expanded on it. So, man, I'll tell you what, I'm glad you've got to make that decision, because I don't know what in the world you would do on that one.
And that was episode 144. And George also talked about how cool it was, you know, for us to listen to him talking about growing up, going to these reunions and hanging out with Shifty Powers kids and Tom Malarkey's kids, and just growing up around, not only around them, but their children, and how even as their parents have passed on, the children of Easy Company have kind of held this tight community, and they still communicate, you know, and reach out and maintain that family, if you will. And so that was another great episode.
Yeah, I was sorry that I missed that one. I forget why, but yeah, that was definitely one I really wish I could have made, because of course George Luz is such a beloved character, and it was an interesting time for Henry too. With, you know, I think that was the beginning of the National Archives reaching out, correct, about potentially, you know, having the Bible, and Henry having to make that decision: do I give it to him? Do I keep it in the family? You know, so, and I don't know. I never did hear what he finally did.
I don't think there was ever a final.
Yeah.
I think it was still up in the air. I don't want to I don't know. I don't know if he's getting, first refusal when he finally makes that decision, or what he's going to do. I'm not quite sure. But speaking of Band of Brothers, I'm looking at you in that shirt. And obviously, is that a third armor or second armor patch on your sleeve? It's a little blurry. With your 5 o'clock shadow and the captain's bar on there, and the way you're kind of doing that Kubrick stare up, you got a Nixon air going to you. You look like Nixon. You just need like a bottle of VAT 69 in front of you, or was it VAT 67? You do.
Yeah, or maybe a bacon sandwich.
Yeah, bacon sandwich. Well, no, he never got the bacon sandwich. He's still looking for the bacon sandwich. But yeah, with your screen the way it is, you got a Nixon vibe going for you.
Yeah, I'll take it.
And just a heads up, we're talking about WTSPWWII.com earlier. If you guys go there, you're new to our podcast, you want to hear some of these episodes, click on the magnifying glass at the top and just type in EP-144, and it'll pull up the George Allows episode, or type in EP, one of the other episodes, and you can go back and listen. And out of all the podcasts on the Digital 410 network, What's the Scuttlebutt is probably close to being the most full available. Obviously, you have storage space concerns, and so with my what's in your head and my fail to fail, I've gone back and deleted some of the old ones and make them available still through redeployment episodes. But I try to keep as many of the What's the Scuttlebutts in there so you guys can go back and listen to. And the ones I have removed, I will replay later on as part of a best of episode. But we try to make as many of the old episodes still available to you despite storage space limits on our website, because that's just the way technology works. And so that was episode 144 with George Lush Jr. We're going to go to episode 146. March 21st, Saul David was on. This was an episode Jeff wasn't available on, because this is one of the few episodes we actually recorded in the middle of the day in order to get Saul on. And you're going to hear a significant difference in the quality of my recording, because I actually recorded this at work in an empty office, and so I don't have all the sound deadening and the echo deadening, but it's still a great episode. Here is episode 121, Mr. Saul David. Well, that's what I was kind of wondering. It'd be interesting to hear the names that maybe armchair quarterbacks now could have said, well, this person was far more suitable to serve that role. Has any name throughout history been kind of put into that ring of, if so-and-so would have served instead of Churchill, the outcome would have been maybe expedited?
Well, you could possibly go back to some of the other major crises of existential crises of Britain's history to, without getting too esoteric about it, but I've written about all of these conflicts, Don, so I'll just reel off a couple. The War of the Spanish Succession, which is the war in which one of our greatest generals and military commanders, the Duke of Marlborough, fought a succession of astonishing victories against the French. And the context, of course, is that the French at that time were utterly dominant as a continental military power. And it was looking like they were going to dominate the continent. Even though we had a relatively powerful navy, it wasn't anything like as powerful as it became. And there was a real danger that if France dominates the continent, Britain, gets snuffed out really as a growing power, and what of course becomes by the beginning of the 19th century the most dominant maritime power in the world, and retains that position, of course, until it's taken over by the US in the 20th century.
One of the cool things about having someone like Saul David on the show, who has published so many books on so many different aspects of World War II, a lot of times when you have someone on who specializes in a particular campaign, you got to have your questions revolve around that area. With Saul, you can just, anything that comes off the top of your head, you can just throw the question out, and chances are he's published something based on whatever it is. And in that episode, we cover a lot of ground because, we went from talking about Churchill to that follow-up question of, looking at it now, was there somebody, as we're talking about, who possibly could have filled that role and maybe done it worse or better? And that is it was a very interesting episode, and it's another great one to go back to and listen. And if you guys missed that episode, please go back and check out episode 146. But very, very interesting author and very interesting guest, and we were very lucky to have him on. But that was just another great show.
Yeah, another great one that I missed too, and I remember that one because of the timing. Yeah, the recording time for me and the time difference for him, of course. I'm glad you guys could make that work. But yeah, He's quite a character. We were definitely lucky to have him in the in our bank there of episodes.
This next guest coming from episode 150 still holds the record for the most appearances on the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. Back on April 27th, this was his 5th appearance, and he was talking about his recent trip to the Pacific and going to Guam and flying over Wake Island and going to it was Iwo, wasn't it? And yeah, here we go, episode 150. Mr. Jared Frederick.
There's so many World War II sites on Guam. It's also the site of our nation's westernmost national park, Warren the Pacific's National Park, and so that for me as a former park ranger, that was a very interesting experience because it felt like I was visiting a national park in a foreign country almost. And there's just a lot of fascinating sites along the two major landing beaches. You can go up in the trails and find Japanese concrete bunkers in various emplacements. They have a really nice museum there. Of course, the naval base there is huge to this very day, and it's all built on the infrastructure of what was put there during World War II. That was one of the largest supply depots on the planet, comparable to a massive Amazon warehouse, essentially.
Yeah.
Because that was for the last year of the war, that was the major jumping off point as far as logistics go. And so it was incredible to see all this history, but also to see the very active legacy of it still being used today. And what one of our tour guides called, I thought, which was very clever, he called it the Island Curtain.
One of the things that brought to my attention, it never even occurred to me that out of that episode, is that how quickly we, meaning American citizens, may and most likely will lose access to some of those grounds, particularly what was Iwo Jima. I think he was basically saying, like, yeah, they let us in there like once every 3 years on an anniversary, but chances are after the last few veterans pass away, they'll probably just end that. And now, we see what's going on with the rising tensions in the Pacific again. We know that Peleliu now is being kind of rebuilt to support military movements now, and how a lot of this stuff we may not have access to in the near future. And all more reason that if you guys have on your bucket list to fly down and see some of these battlefields in the Pacific on some of these islands, it would probably behoove you to start scheduling those sooner than later.
Yeah, that's exactly what I remember standing out the most. I mean, I've met several people who have, toured Iwo Jima for a number of reasons, and it's cool to hear his story. But yeah, when he mentioned that, he said, I remember him saying, like, you may want to book it pretty soon, because who knows? Hopefully that may just be an assumption. I don't know, but if that comes to fruition, man, what a shame that would be, to have something like that go away. And I'm sure there are, every historian and author, I'm sure is privy to that information, and I'm hoping compiling all that they can, to preserve, as much as we can, and potentially release new books about the subject, or things that have been overlooked for the last 80 years. But yeah, when Jared said that, it was a little bit unnerving, I guess, to think that these things just aren't always going to be there.
Yeah, because I think we take for granted, most of the battlefields over in Europe, most of them are in allied countries or Axis countries who now have a population to want to share the mistakes that the previous generations made to prevent them from happening, who kind of puts aside the shame that may have been involved in some of the actions. But then you have countries who kind of maybe want to forget. I'm not saying this is what Japan's wanting to do, but they don't exactly come out smelling like roses and some of this stuff. And maybe they just want to, hey, we'll honor the battlefield, let the vets come. But once that generation's gone, maybe they want to move past it a little bit. I don't know. I guess it's weird to us to think that there might be an entrance gate on some of these places that are just locked up and the lights are proverbially turned off. And it's weird to think that is a very another example. I was just kind of talking about how they're forming some of these island atoll runways and all that for military actions. And a lot of us as history lovers, we can't fathom that. But Jared also reminded us, I think, his fourth time on that, hey, during World War II, the Army wanted to knock down some of that pesky historical stuff in Gettysburg to outfit some soldiers because they didn't care about history. They're worried about here and now. That's perfectly good land we could do some training on. And luckily the Park Service stepped in and said, no, we'll find some other land for you to park some soldiers on. We'll leave Gettysburg alone. It's not unheard of, The military needs of the now sometimes outweigh that of the past, and depending on which government you're talking about, and what history you're talking about, they may be quicker to say, yeah, let's just knock down some of those old buildings and break up some 80-year-old concrete and let's lay some new rebar and make this stuff usable.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy to think about.
We're going to head on up to May of 24, episode 153. Luke Schultzel, he has been on the show, I think, once or twice before. He did War Pigs, and on that particular episode, he came on to promote his new project, Come Out Fighting, which also features Dolph Lundgren, who was also in War Pigs. And so here's Luke giving us a little quick rundown on working with Dolph Lundgren again.
Getting to work with some of those heavy hitters. And, Dolph, I don't know, some people maybe have heard the news. He's been battling cancer for the last several years. He, with War Pigs so long ago, he agreed to do it, and he kind of was the first name cast to kind of say yes. And he set the whole ball in motion to get other people, get the financing involved, to get other people to say yes. So, what an amazing, outstanding man. And what's fun about Dolph is, obviously he's a big action star. And in this one, he, obviously we utilize him a little bit differently. But we love developing characters, and so it's been a lot of fun getting to work with Dolph Lundgren to kind of like really hone in a character that he wants to play, and then just kind of adapt him into a film.
When I started this podcast back in 2018, my goal was to interview vets, which sadly there's fewer to interview, and authors. But it never occurred to me that we would have a number of filmmakers and actors and producers on this podcast. Luke's been on twice. Obviously, R.J. Nevin's been on a handful of times from Walking Point. Coming up here in a few, actually, very next clip, Scott Gibson was on the show. We had Freddie Joe Farnsworth on the show. And so I never really foreseen that part of my podcasting world. And obviously all the insight that Henry's brought onto the show about the production of the Pacific. And so that's one of the things that, looking back at our podcast, that I never really seen coming. That's not really, when you think about doing a World War II podcast, at least I never really thought of all the celebrity stuff we'd have involved.
Yeah, it's an important element because, we talk movies so much, and because it's an important vehicle to keep history alive, and so it only makes sense. And I'm excited to see, kind of where that goes, because all of the guys that we've had on, they've got friends and they've got connections, and there'll be new stuff coming out, right? Everybody's going crazy for Masters of the Air right now. Who knows, a year from now, we may have somebody that had something to do with that. Or, we'll see what else comes down the line. So yeah, it's impressed me, man. I look back like, wow, who would have thought? My son watches Band of Brothers like continuously. It's just on in his room, right? I hear it going all the time, and when I see Farnsworth coming out on the horse, Fat Boy, I just like, wow, it was cool to have that conversation with him. And I want to say we've had him on more than once, right?
I've had him on What's the Scuttlebutt. We had him on the What's in Your Head podcast. I'm not sure if he came on the What's Scuttlebutt twice. I know obviously he was here once. I had him on What's in Your Head once. Because we obviously,
yeah, maybe just the once, but I've had several conversations with him just since then about different things and in the film industry, and it's neat. And then you put in the Pacific, and you watch our friend Scott Gibson, who's just been such a great part of the show, such a huge supporter. I mean, when he was in Hawaii here a couple of weeks ago, I talked to him so much leading up to the trip, and while he was there, talked to him several times when he was hanging out with some of the other Pacific actors, right? The guys that played J.P. Morgan, and of course the guy that played Basilone and Runner and Hoosier. All those actors were there, and to even have the opportunity for me to get a message to one of those other guys that he did for me was really special. So. Yeah, What's the Scuttlebutt is definitely opened so many opportunities for both of us. I don't think we saw coming, a couple years ago.
And speaking of Scott Gibson, he gave us kind of a What's the Scuttlebutt exclusive. We learned on his interview about the original actor that was cast to play John Basilone and how he didn't make past workday number 1.
The actor who was supposed to play John Basilone was fired on his first day of boot camp. They just made a choice, just didn't work out. So guy hadn't even been on screen yet, and he got fired. And these things happen that, obviously not a lot of people know about, but we all felt like, holy shit, if this can happen. So you just wanted to get on screen as quickly as possible on camera, and you're done.
Let's make it more expensive for them to fire me. Yeah, we don't want to do reshoots.
They still had to pay him. But subsequently over the years, it's just become bigger and bigger. More people interested, more fans, younger fans. As a result, it's unlike anything else in terms of being a celebrity, is the fact that you are representing, someone who fought in the Pacific and European, and it's so incredibly humbling.
That'd be an interesting question I would love to have if we were ever so fortunate to have any cast member of Masters of the Air on. And that is, and Scott goes on to talk about it more, when they were filming Band of Brothers, they had no real idea of the impact on pop culture and historical culture that those actors who were portraying those men, what sort of impact they would have on us, your son, and how they will forever be known as Nixon, Malarkey, Dick Winters, Ack Haldane. And obviously Scott and the guys, they saw what happened with the cast of the Band of Brothers and how they are now forever kind of known for the people they played, even though so many of them have gone on to do so many other projects, but they will always be the guy from Band of Brothers. And Scott goes on to talk about how the importance and the impact on his life, even after that series is done and been aired, how he's now taken this role in the World War II community, forever kind of portraying the modern day interpretation of who Ack Haldane is. It would be interesting to see if the guys, particularly the ones who don't already have a name for themselves, I know they kind of broke the mold a little bit with Masters of the Air, that some of the key characters already have a career behind them, whereas in the past they kind of went with more quote-unquote no names. But it would be interesting to talk to those guys and see if any of that went into their mind going into Masters of the Air. Like, chances are if we do this right and history follows what we've seen laid out from Band of Brothers in the Pacific, I'm forever going to be associated with this gentleman, his family, and his memory, and his contribution to the war effort. I better fucking do this right.
Yeah, no, Scott talks about that a lot. And like you said, at least the guys in the Pacific had an understanding, whereas the guys from Band of Brothers, I mean, who knew if that was even going to flop, right? I mean, this isn't Saving Private Ryan. We don't want this, yeah, right? Because it was so different. And and we've talked about this probably maybe too many times with Masters of the Air, and I still have this. I'm cautiously optimistic about it because the pressure's really on. And, like you said, when you put Austin Butler, when you put Elvis in the cockpit of a B-17, what effect is that going to have on people? And, you're right. Some of those guys from Band of Brothers, I don't know if you ever saw them do an acting job again. Um, some of them probably felt like, hey, I'm probably never going to top this. I'm going to go back and get a real job because, sometimes that can, be detrimental for your career.
Typecast.
I remember I read a story about how John Wayne turned down being Marshall Dillon. And one of the things, because he had the foresight, he felt that was going to be so successful, which Gunsmoke became a very successful TV show. He didn't want to be limited to just one role. Now, the guy that plays Marshall Dillon, that's all he's ever been known for. And the show ran for, decades. So that's all he ever needed. So yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how Masters of the Air does. Number one, and number two, yeah, if we can get any kind of intel once this thing comes out, like you said, from anybody that was on set, just to see what their mindset was, going in to a project like that, to follow up. How do you follow Band of Brothers in the Pacific? That had to be going through their head.
As a fan, as a viewer, I want to kind of give our audience a piece of advice, something that I picked up years ago, probably in high school or shortly after. I don't allow myself to buy into the hype. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be a great show, but what I mean by that is, growing up in Columbus, Ohio, we had Cedar Point and Kings Island, two huge amusement parks. Cedar Point's been known for history of being one of the best top amusement parks. But living smack dab in between these two amusement parks, every 3 or 4 years, they would start, we'll have the new Manus ride or this ride, yada, yada. And everybody, the Manus, blah, blah, blah. And they would build it up, and you stand in line, you're nervous, you're scared. And you get on it, like, how's the ride? Not what I thought it was, but it was pretty good, because you buy in the hype. You're buying in the hype, you're buying in the hype, you're buying the hype, all this. And you see this, like, I don't know, for those of you who play video games, they just announced that Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be coming out in 2025. And there's already people, like, pulling apart trailers and dedicating a life to these websites. It's like, you're going to spend the next 2 years picking through every little thing you can about Grand Theft Auto 6, or people spent the last 3 years digging through everything they could on Masters of the Air. You're going to get yourself so invested in these projects that how can they possibly stand up to the hype that you built around them? Yes, Jeff and I are excited. I don't know about Jeff, but I'm not digging through archives on websites trying to find everything else I can about the show. I will ingest the show. I will see how I feel about it, and then I will go back based on how I feel about it and spend my time. Because I'm not a big fan of spoilers. I've seen people do this all the time, like when Yellowstone's out. I'm a big fan of Yellowstone. I want to see what's going to happen next season. Why? Because when next season comes out, you're already going to know what's happened. I don't get the people who spend time looking for spoilers. And so I say all that to say this: if you want to enjoy these series and these shows and these movies for what they are, ingest them as they come along. Don't overhype them, and you probably be less likely to be disappointed. Because then you don't have to say, well, it was good, but not as good as I was hoping it would be. Have a decent bar of anticipation, and then that'll allow you to actually be impressed by something instead of being let down by it.
Yeah, it's kind of an old Army mindset, too. You just prepare for the worst, and anything less is that much better. And I guess for me, because the air war is just kind of my biggest passion in the Second World War, right? I mean, it's just growing up around going to air shows, to go to see B-17s, watching the Memphis Belle, umpteen times, getting to meet Captain Morgan. That never left me. And I've expanded a lot of my interests, of course, but the air war, the 8th Air Force, the 100th Bomb Group, B-17s, and pinks and greens and silver wings, man, like it just doesn't get any better than that. So I guess that's why I'm I don't want to know too much. I don't because like I said, I don't want to know yet. I've read the book. I'm curious, and I read the book long before it was even going to be called Masters of the Air. Initially, it was the Mighty Eighth. And that book came as like a recommendation to read Gerald Astor's The Mighty Eighth. I read The Mighty Eighth first, and then I read Masters of the Air, and then I heard the series got changed to Masters of the Air, which I thought was a crummy title initially. I thought, man, Matt, like The Mighty Eighth, that's perfect. But then I read somewhere too that maybe they thought it would be confusing that it was based off of the Mighty Eighth book and not Masters of the Air, because it truly is based off of the characters that they focus on in Masters of the Air. So that makes sense. It would be like calling Band of Brothers something different. It's based on Stephen Ambrose's book, Band of Brothers. So to call it anything else would be silly, and I learned that later on. But
well, I think also what we discovered by watching the original trailer, by calling it Masters of the Air, you can incorporate other wings of the Air Corps into it and not just the bomb group.
Right. Excited nonetheless, for sure.
Next episode 160, going all the way back to August. This guest was fantastic. He lives the life. He's a train conductor by trade, but someone needs to get a camera and do a YouTube video in his house. I want to see his house. Apparently it's all decked out in 1940s theme. He probably is the guy with the asbestos fake snow around his tree right now. He runs this fantastic website. You guys, if you haven't checked it out, shame on you. He's out of Montana. It's called WLVN 1940s Radio. Go to WTSPWWII.com, click on the menu drop down, and we have a bar take you right to his website. And what separates him, tell you what, let's play the clip and then we'll talk more about it, because it's a very cool project, and it's something that's it's taking technology and using it for the right things. But I think it's very important, because that is exactly what separates you from just listening to, a Spotify playlist or a Pandora where you're going to hear the same 38 songs.
Yeah, and that took me about 2 years to get all of the music together. I've got over 25,000 files of music and radio shows, commercials, news, and I'm collecting even more. I've found people that have news stories from that time that I've never found, and so you pay a little bit of money and you get those files, and I'm able to put them onto my radio station, news events that people probably hadn't even heard of. And it's not even war stuff. It could be just regular news events, but that's what immerses more into the 1940s lifestyle, because not always did you have war news. You had news about the economy, you had news about things that were going on around the world other than the war.
And so if you go to his website right now, it's streaming live. You can listen to the background at work, you can listen to the background at your home, and right now there's got some Christmas themed stuff. He takes those files that he just talked about and he programs it just like a modern day radio station. Don't want to spoil it for y'all, but when you walk into a modern day radio station, I know I worked in one for 6 years. It's a computer with a playlist with commercials embedded into it. That's why when you call the DJ and ask for a song, they never play it, because it's already pre-programmed by the program director. They do the same thing. The only difference is, instead of playing modern music and modern news stories, he has music, news stories, sports events. I think one day he played an entire game from the Red Sox in 1943. It's all on there. It streams in real time. And the cool thing is, yes, like some radio stations, you'll hear a song every once in a while, but radio back then was not like it is nowadays, where it's repetition. We're going to, hit you with the same song over and over again to make you like it. It was, here's what's out there, here's what people like. And there's been so many songs I've heard on his station, because I'll play it at work in my headphones while I'm doing IT stuff. There's songs I've never heard of before. I'm like, wow, that's great. Or I've heard songs, I had to reach out to him. I've talked about before. There was just a little tag in a song that I recognized from a Beastie Boys song off their album Paul's Boutique that they had mixed into one of their songs. He went back and found it. He looked at his playlist like, oh, that's so-and-so from 1939. It's like, oh, that's where Beastie Boys got it. And so I've even found cool things like that on there. And so go to our website, click on it. And Jeff and I have talked about this before. We all know, if you're a living historian or World War II reenactor, we've all been to the events, or somebody have the old broken Bakelite radio or an old wood box radio, and they got the Bluetooth speaker in it. and they're streaming Spotify or Pandora, listening to World War II radio, which is fine until that QuickBooks commercial comes on during tax season, which completely bumps you. And so if you're streaming WLVN 1940s radio from your phone hidden in your knapsack into the Bluetooth speaker hidden in that radio, the only modern day commercial that'll come on is one commercial like every 2 hours promoting his radio station. And even then, with the exception of the word .com, it doesn't really bump you. And so it's like the perfect thing to add to your ambiance on your living history event. And one of the things we're going to try to do next year for VKE, and I reached out to him this year and he was going to do it, but he was out of town and I kind of got a hold of him last minute. We're going to produce news reports based on the event we're putting on. So next year when we liberate the train in France from the Nazis who were taking over the von Kessinger Express, we're going to have him play news stories about that event so that when the audience is walking through our camp after the train ride, those with a delicate ear who's paying attention, there'll be a news report playing about the event that they just experienced in real life. Like, what? Train? What? Oh, wow. And so it kind of immersed them. And that's something, you can reach out to Tony, and if you guys are putting on an event somewhere, he'll be more than happy to create some commercials to talk or news stories to talk about your event. He wants to be part of that living history immersion. And so where else can he get that? He's a super great guy, fantastic website. Check it out. And Jeff was one of the guys who brought his attention to me.
Yeah, it's kind of like he was the missing link for reenacting. I mean, I've listened to the 40s Junction on Sirius XM radio for years, and
back when it was actually channel 40, then they bumped it to like 385.
Yeah, it was 40s on 4, and then it went to 73, and it's moved around so many times. But yeah, and like I said, it's not that it's bad, but there really is no commercials. There's certainly no baseball games. I mean, yeah, I was working on the Jeep here on a Saturday, and I caught a Yankees-Cardinals game or something, the whole game. So, yeah, what Tony's really done is just taken it to a next level. He's given reenactors exactly what we want, and not just the music, but the advertisements. I remember one about Philadelphia cream cheese, and it only cost one ration coin for 2 3.5-ounce tubs of Philadelphia cream cheese. And you hear a lot of stuff, just radio shows. I've caught The Lone Ranger on there before, and the different comedy shows. So you learn a lot more about the time, about the era, just getting outside of the music itself, right? I mean, you go to an air show, you go to a living history event, and it's the Andrews Sisters, and it's Bing Crosby, and that's great, or Glenn Miller, and that's great, but he's got everything, and like you said, it's in chronological order. So It's just you hop on WLVN 1940s radio right now. It's December of 43. You're not going to hear 1945 stuff until the year 2025. It's incredible what he has done. It's marvelous what he's accomplished.
And with the exception of an XM radio station, when you turn on that station, and Jeff turns on that station, and I turn on that station, we were all listening to the exact same thing, the exact same time, give or take 3 or 5 seconds for buffering. When I turn on a Spotify playlist and Jeff turns it on, it's not live. It's just random stuff with some ads. So you're literally sharing that experience with his entire audience. And it's wicked cool. And one of the things I heard one time I thought was cool, it was, I don't want to say it was a commercial. It was almost like a short infomercial. It was about, I want to say it was talking to parents about how they can enlist their children, or to kids who just recently graduated high school, how they can enlist in the Civilians Conservation Corps. And how cool is that? That was very cool to hear. I'm like, get your parents' permission and come on down and sign up for the Civilian Conservation Corps. And that's something, we've touched briefly on the show before, but that's not something you hear a lot unless you go searching for it. I want to learn more about the Civilian Conservation Corps and things they're doing. So you can learn and discover a lot of very cool things over at WLVN 1940s radio. We got 2 more to go. I'm going to wrap it all up. Another great guest, September 13, 2023, Tim Gray, the founder and CEO of World War II Foundation, and talking about the things they have going on. And just recently they had an event with Scott Gibson and a lot of cool things going on down in Hawaii. They were a big part of that, and we had Tim on our website back in September.
We've got Jeff Daniels, Jim Nance from CBS Sports does a lot of our films, Gary Sinise. We've had Liev Schreiber, Darius Rucker, Luke Bryan. We do these films, but the thing that makes them a little different is that we shoot them all on location. So if we're going to do a film on Guadalcanal, we go to Guadalcanal. If we're going to do a film on Auschwitz, we go to Auschwitz. If we're going to do one on Peleliu, we go to Peleliu. Iwo Jima, same thing. So every film that we shoot on location in Europe or the Pacific, where the story played out. And it's pretty amazing. I know you guys delve into the Pacific a lot, but when you go back there, this year we were on Guam, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and just the remnants of the battles that went on there, and to see those, still there. Peleliu is considered the most well-preserved battlefield in the world because it's illegal to take anything off the island. So, there were 500 caves on Peleliu that the Japanese had. So you go into those caves, and there are samurai swords, there are radios, there are Coke bottles, there are helmets, there are guns, there are all these things. It's like the battle, ended in the fall of 1944, and everybody just dropped everything, and it's all still there.
One of the things I've been wanting to do, I never get around to just because of how quickly we record these things live and all that, but a lot of times there's very cool conversations we have with the guests before we go on live. And sometimes I need to record those and then put those up on Patreon. One of the things that was cool about Tim Gray that separates him from most of our guests were heavy into World War II. And so usually they got World War II stuff hanging up in the background, like Jeff and I have radios in the canteens. Tim had his logo, but then he had all 1980 stuff. He's so fascinated with when he grew up in the 80s. He had an old 1982 Macintosh computer behind him. He had the old radio that once used to be referred to as a ghetto blaster, but I don't think, I think we have to use a different phrase for that nowadays. But he had that old radio back there. And before we went live, we were just talking about his love for his childhood and all things 80s and how most of us were out looking for World War II stuff, but he's trying to track down all the 80s stuff. And so it was very cool to, before we went live, talking about all the 80s stuff and him showing off all his 80s stuff, just like Jeff and I show off all our 1940 stuff on the show. And so there's a lot of cool conversations we have that you guys never hear that I need to record. And then after the show, say, hey, you mind if I do something with that? And maybe offer that up as a little extra bonus for those of you on Patreon.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea, because how often we just kind of, the guest comes on and we're just hacking away, and then, Don just cuts us off like, all right, save it for the show. Let's get going, because we get into some good stuff. And man, I mean, Tim Gray, dude, we had Tim Gray on What's the Scuttlebutt. I mean, that was just huge. And it just impressed me. You could just hear in his voice there, he's just such a nice, easygoing, likable guy. And to look at what he has done and accomplished and what he's still doing, for him to take the time, and hang out with us for an hour and to be so complimentary of it. And you could tell he just had a lot of fun, just three guys, and we talk about it a lot at What's the Scuttlebutt. I tell folks that are kind of nervous, with their first time coming on, I'm like, look, the best way I can describe it, it's like three of us hanging around a campfire at a living history event, just talking about our love for World War II. And Tim just really fell into that, immediately once the episode started. So that's definitely one that if I go back to like the top three guests that we've had thus far, if you wanted like an elevator speech for why people should listen to What's the Scuttlebutt, Tim Gray's name's going to come up for me for sure.
October 25th, not too long ago. It was one of those episodes where I was able to we left the World War II era, and I was able to scratch an itch that I had recently developed, which was interest in, and I give credit to Jeff because he's mentioned on so many episodes, hey, to truly understand World War II, you got to understand what happened pre-war. And you were focusing a lot on World War I. You're reading some Hemingway stuff. And one day at work, for whatever reason, I think in my mind I was processing this new theory that we're living through the silent depression with way inflation and our economy is going. And so I started just looking at photos of the Great Depression, and hence my hat and all that. And then one weekend I was bored and I started watching. I'd seen this clip on TikTok. It was Chris Rock and the guy from American Psycho. I always forget his name. And they're in World War I uniforms. And they're talking, it's 3 African Americans in World War I uniforms, and the guy from American Psycho, I always forget his name, and he's in a World War I uniform, and they're talking about how the NCOs were treating the African Americans like shit and this and that, and how he's coming in. And I'm like, what movie is this? And it's a movie called Amsterdam. Did some research. It has the guy who played Snafu from the Pacific on it. Chris Rock's got a short role in it. Got a bunch of people in it. Robert De Niro plays a General Smedley Butler type character, and kind of like, not to the extreme of, but kind of in the way of Inglourious Bastards, it's historical fiction, but not that extreme. They basically took 3 make-believe characters, Margot Robbie's in it as well, and they put them right smack dab in the middle of the business plan. Now, for those of you not familiar with the business plan, which is why I had this next guest on, Mr. Colin Heaton, we were talking about the bonus army. We kind of laid the groundwork. We talked about the Great Depression, how the run on the banks, stock market crash, how that led to the march of the bonus army, which led to Smedley Butler and an active plot to overthrow the government, to take FDR out and bring in a third party. And so I reached out to Colin, and here's a clip from episode 166. Obviously, that's a lot to cover, but here's a quick synopsis of us just talking about the bonus army, and then I got a little information for Jeff that he might get excited about.
And even though the act was passed a decade before, in July of 32, it was revisited by the House of Representatives. And again, it was like shut down. Well, that word spread like the measles, because that's when guys came from every corner of the country as fast as they could. By the end of the second week of July, I mean, the estimates say 17 to 25,000 people were in the area surrounding D.C. A lot of these people were on private property owned by a guy who said, hey, you can camp here. It's not on federal property. It's private property. They can't do anything to you.
Across the river.
Across the river, the Anacostia. And but it didn't matter, because the government could not have 17 to 25,000 people. A lot of them were civilians. A lot of them were family members. But they could not have that many people publicly demonstrating against the federal government in such an open way, because that really makes you look stupid if you're the Fed and you haven't resolved an issue.
And Colin just pointed out something very important. This is the Depression. As I said, people are losing their houses, people are losing their farms. So it wasn't just the vets. It was his wife, their kids, because they had nowhere to go. So they're all heading east. Now they're making a great migration east, starting from California. Everybody just started getting in this long march, hopping in old jalopies on donkeys, wagons, whatever form of transportation, the heel toe express. And they set up these Hoovervilles all through Washington. And what we're talking about is the World War I vets. They were promised through a bill to get a bonus pay issued to them. The price differed based on the amount of entries they acquired, but the bill wasn't guaranteed to be fulfilled until like 1943. And this is 1933. Great Depression. People are starving. And so all these vets marched to D.C. saying, hey, how about you just go ahead and give us our money now? And so as you heard them, 70,000 World War I troops plus their families protesting in Washington, wanting their money. And it turned into a riot. Patton, MacArthur, the whole nine out there, tanks, tear gas, complete nightmare. Go listen to EP-166. Now, Jeff, I will reach out to Mr. Colin Heaton after Masters of the Air comes on, because when I was doing my show prep for that, and he and I discussed it a little bit off the air, he was one of the historical references used by the production crew of Masters of the Air. So he provided some military historian advice and guidelines. Why am I going blank on that title? The same role you played for Walking Point. He did military advisory for sections of Masters of the Air. So who knows? Maybe after it comes out and a little time passed, maybe he can put us in touch with some people who possibly get us in touch with some other people. Maybe we can make some things happen. So once again, relationships that we form unintentionally by this show. Who knows?
Yeah.
And that's going to wrap it up for the clips of some of the more favorable or memorable episodes of 2023. Plenty more to come in 2024. I'm still reading The Pacific Alamo, or Alamo of the Pacific. Jeff, what are you currently reading?
So I recently just finished Citizen Soldiers by Stephen Ambrose, which you can go back a couple episodes and where I talk about that. But I was very excited. Once I finished that, I knew exactly what I was going to be reading because I do have a break in my in the semester for my college, so I got a couple weeks where I don't have to be reading something that's not very fun. So I am now 5 chapters already in the John Luckadoo's book, Damn Lucky. This is the story. So John Luckadoo was a B-17 pilot with the Bloody 100th. It wouldn't surprise me if his name at least came up during Masters of the Air. I don't know if it will or not, but he certainly knew the other pilots that revolved around. And I was lucky enough, a couple weeks ago, I guess it was, when I was up in Dallas. Yeah, it was Veterans Day weekend. I did not know he was going to be there. I just got that information like last minute. And, of course, I was in my, my Air Corps uniform and my A2 and my Crusher and Mae West and everything. And they said, "Oh, you need to go talk to John Luckadoo." I said, "John Luckadoo's here? Are you kidding?" So it was really cool to hang out with him. And I don't know if we can see it or not, but when he signed this book, we were actually talking about, of all things, we were talking about Iraq. And we had some very similar, I guess, emotions at about the same age when he was flying his 25 missions and when I was doing my thing over there. And it was just kind of a really neat moment to be able to just kind of get on his level. And he recognized it right away. This is not just somebody in line that's going to pay $20, sign my book. Okay, thanks. Shake your hand. Nice to meet you, and move on. So it was really, really nice to just have that one-on-one with him for a few minutes and get some pictures taken. And to just the way he looked me in the eye when he shook my hand, it was just kind of like he knew and I knew, and we didn't have to say anything. But he was also really impressed with the fact that I had just seen him in a documentary that has not been released to the public yet. And hopefully it will soon, but it's about an hour and a half long documentary about a potentially a story that myself and Dennis Blocker and several others are trying to get to be made into a book so people can learn about this other B-17 pilot. But they introduced John Luckadoo in the documentary as well. Not that he was in the same bomb group, but he was flying about the same time, flew to some of the same targets, and really could kind of give some insight. So it was really special. I'm already 5 chapters in. It's an incredible book. Kevin Maurer, #1 New York Times bestselling author, has done this one here again called Damn Lucky, the story of John Luckadoo of the 100th Bomb Group.
It's interesting. I was watching a video on YouTube. It was can't remember who produced it, but they're over in the United Kingdom, and they had 3 relatively modern day veterans on Iraq War, Gulf War, and the newer combat, and then they actually still had a World War II veteran there who fought, over in the United Kingdom during the war. And as you were just saying, despite the fact that your wars are 65, 75 years apart, 55 years apart, depending on when people serve, they basically all had the same insights. They felt the same thing, even though they had different conflicts. they experienced different things, but the similarity in just combat in and of itself, even though they served in different branches and in different forms, they all basically shared the same experience and had the same outlook and thoughts on things. And it's very interesting to see, you know, the 90-year-old sit next to the 30-year-old, sit next to the 40-year-old, and then they had one gentleman there who got shot through the neck, so he's completely paralyzed. I mean, he's got the breathing apparatus on, controls the wheelchair, and just how they all just basically experienced, or even post-war, the same sort of torment and just the whole repatriating and back into civilization. It was very interesting to see over the swath of generations how just that commonality, it doesn't matter. You all experience the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when it came to you standing in line, he looked at you and saw your uniform was squared away, and you just weren't some schmo who got some fake bomber jacket off of Amazon and put on some Dickies and like, hey guy, how are you? I mean, I'm sure the fact that your uniform was squared away is like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, it was what a special treat. It was very enjoyable, for sure.
And speaking of special treats, we hope each and every one of you all enjoyed this special treat of the holiday Christmas edition of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. We're very excited to see what comes along in 2024, and we're excited to have each and every one of you come along for the ride. Do us a huge favor, share our podcast with like-minded friends, post us on Facebook, Instagram, share our YouTube videos, and you can follow us. Just head over to WTSPWWII.com. You can click on the social media links, and you can find all our links to Instagram, TikToks, and YouTube, and all that good stuff. Thank you guys so very, very much. And we're going to be off next week for the holidays, but we'll be back in 2024. And for myself and Jeff Copsetta and everyone else, thank you very much.
This has been a Digital 410 production.